Okay, really quickly, I want to run through these couple things that I keep seeing the same questions or the same mistakes on past assessments. You do have to know your quadrants and axis. So make sure you understand quadrant 1 starts here, it goes counterclockwise. This is your x-axis, so if it falls on the line, you would say x-axis. This is your y-axis, so if it falls on the line, you would say y-axis. And then this is your origin, 0, 0. So you do need to know the parts of the coordinate plane and the labels for them. I don't think plotting the points is a problem, right? I think most of y'all do fine with that. The only thing that I see is sometimes y'all mess up something like this. Remember, this is your first movement, so this one would not move left and right. It would just move up 3. Also, when you put things on the coordinate plane, you need to label them. So if this is the point, you need to label it with the letter that corresponds to it. And again, no issues really in giving me those, giving me the coordinates and give me the quadrants. Just make sure that you know where they are. One thing when you're doing these, you are really just giving me a picture of what is happening. So when you do a graph or a chart to represent a situation, you typically just have to give the first quadrant like this. You do need to label it. So this is going to be like time, and this is going to be like my heart rate, what's happening. You don't have to give me any numbers, and you don't have to give me any type of grid, okay? Once you label it, you're just going to give me a picture of what happens. Well, as I warm up, my heart rate probably goes up gradually. As I exercise, my heart rate probably goes up to a point. Obviously, it's not going to keep going or we have a bigger problem, right? And then as I cool down, my heart rate's probably going to gradually come down. And so that's a picture. And you can label it. You can say, here's my warm up. Here's my exercise. And here's my cool down. You're welcome to label it so you can tell me what you were thinking as you were drawing the graph as well, if you want to be explanatory. What I require, though, is that you have the lines and that you have the labels, okay? Those are required. This right here is required, but the explaining what you were thinking when you were drawing it is okay. You don't have to. You can. Some people prefer it so that I understand what you meant by what's going on. Each table is a relation, determine the domain and range, and if it is a function. So remember, you do need to list the domain. You only list the numbers one time. So if they repeat, in this case they don't, but if they repeat, list them one time, okay? List them least to greatest. So I'm going to start over here and I'm going to say, well, I have a -6, I have a -4, I have a 1, I have a 4, and I have a 7. I'm going to list them least to greatest. Range is my y value, so I'm going to do the same thing starting with my lowest y, going up. Again, you'll see that my y repeated. Those were both 1. I didn't list it twice. And you would say, yes, this is a function. Because my x's did not repeat, okay? This is how you're going to list it no matter how it gives it to you. If it gives it to you as a graph like this or as a table or however it's going to give it to you, you need to list it in order. Don't repeat it and tell me if it's a function or not, okay? So whether it's ordered pairs or something like this, this is how you're going to list them. Same thing here. They have given it to you as an ordered pair, and now they're asking you to draw it in a different way. Mapping diagrams are either ovals or rectangles, right? However you want to draw them. You need one for your domain and one for your range. You do have to label domain and range on these, okay? So you do have to tell me that the left side is the domain and the right side is the range. Again, you're going to list it least to greatest, and you're not going to repeat it. So you're going to list those x values least to greatest. You're going to list the y values least to greatest. You'll notice 5 repeated. I did not write it twice. Least to greatest would be this, right? And then I am going to draw my arrows from my left side to my right side. So I'm going to say -6. Well, that goes to, well, that's not what I want you to do. -6 goes to +3. And I'm going to do that all the way down. And remember, if the y's repeat, that's fine. It's still a function. If the x's repeat, that is not fine. And you can always tell from this guy if you don't write them twice. And that's the point of not writing them twice, because you want to see if it's a function. And so you'll notice for this one, both of these went to the same answer. That's okay. Each one of these only has one y. So yes, this is a function. So I would say, yes, this is a function. Biggest thing I normally see is people leave these off, or they list it more than once. Don't list it more than once. Make sure you put your labels. When you have something like this, you can really just do your vertical line test here. You should be able to draw a vertical line anywhere on this and touch it on, well, that's not a vertical line. We'll draw an actual vertical line. You should be able to draw a vertical line anywhere on this and touch it only once. So that means that top one is a function. This guy is not a function. If I draw a vertical line, I cross it twice, which means my x repeats. My x is actually going to give me this value and that value, which means one x is going to give me two different y values. No, it is not a function. So that's all you're doing if you're given a graph. You're just telling me if it's a function or not. All right. Each set represents a relation. It wants me to graph it. So now this is the same thing as what you've done in the first page, and the same thing really when it gave it to you. You are just going to plot these points and you are going to tell me, is this a function? You can look at it right away to see if it's a function. You can look at your x's and say they don't repeat. This is going to be a function, but it does tell you to plot those points. So if it instructs you to do it, just make sure you follow each piece of that instruction. All right, so make a table. So you can, when you make this table, you may not necessarily need to multiply. In this case, if you make this table, you're going to see a different pattern. The first thing you want to look at with these is, can I multiply from one to the next? Right? And so I'm going to say, can I multiply? That's what I'm really doing when I see how they're going up. There's no pattern for multiplication. You can tell that because this goes up by 2, by 1, by 1, by 1. This goes up by 2, then by 1. So you can see that there's not really going to be a multiplication right there. And it's not going to help you to multiply. You can look between them. Multiplying any 0 by anything is not going to give you 6. So this right away tells you it's not going to be a multiplication, right? At least not a multiplication alone, because that's an issue right there. So then you're going to look for a different pattern. If I can't multiply to get across, what can I do? So now we're going to see, could I add? So what do I add from here to here? Well, in order to get from there to there, I add a 6. Does that work all the way down? Yeah, it actually does. You'll notice that pattern goes all the way down, which means if I take my x and add 6, I get my function. I get my y value. And so that would be it. F of x equals x plus 6 or y equals x plus 6. To get my y value, I just add 6. So you're looking for a pattern. If multiplication doesn't work, see if addition works. If neither one of them works, then you want to walk across and say, how do I get here? How do I get here? Create that second line and then see if you need to add or subtract from the second line to get to the third. Choose points. You do, and I will say choose 5 points. I will tell you that on your test, but you do want to choose a couple of negatives, a 0, and a couple of positives when you do these, all right? Then you want to plug them in. Make sure you plug them in correctly. So you're going to plug them into this guy right here. So you have a negative, and then you have the negative 2 squared plus 1, a negative 1 squared plus 1. Obviously 0 is never negative, but that's okay. All right, and then you want to make sure you do order of operations. You have to do this exponent first. Negative 2, if I square it, is 4. Apply the negative. Plus 1 is negative 3. Do the same thing all the way down. And then you're going to plot those points. So I have negative 2, negative 3, negative 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 2, negative 3. And then you can see I have this little graph here. This is what's happening to this guy. All right. So pick 5 points, plug them in, graph it. All right. And you do need to connect the dots. If I have not given you individual numbers, you are going to connect them. If I give you individual numbers, you're just going to have points on the graph. all right? But if there's not individual numbers given to you, you are going to connect your dots like that. The last one is absolute value. You do not have to create a chart for this. Absolute value is always your V. And so if you remember that absolute value is always going to be a V, then you just have to figure out where the V is going to go. And so if you remember that this is always what your graph is going to look like, then you need to figure out how it's going to move. The inside moves you left and right, opposite of what you think. So this is going to actually move me right 3. The outside moves you up and down the same direction that you would think. This is going to move me down 3. All right. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to go right 3 and down 3. And I am going to have my V right there. That's where my point's going to be. And then I just need to draw my V. You do not need to do your original one. That first one that I drew was just to remind you of what your graph would look like. So you only have to draw this moved one. All right.